Hello and welcome to the Weather Quarter. I'm Jenny Woodward, and this time we're in the United States, where springtime has delivered some wild weather with staggering and at times tragic consequences. Here in San Francisco, it's been a calmer start to the season, but no matter where you travel in the country, the weather's much talked about and always in the headlines. I started my journey in the nation's capital. It's a beautiful spring day here in Washington. The temperature's about 24 degrees. There are flowers blossoming everywhere, and here at the White House, plenty of tourists around, groups of school children and college students who are celebrating the end of the academic year. It's hard to imagine that they could have severe weather here, and yet it's not uncommon. One man who knows a lot about it is television weather reporter Topper Schutt from WUSA.
Jenny, come on in. It's our weather center. Armageddon was one of those cases where it's going to snow like crazy. There's going to be thunder. There's going to be lightning. There's going to be 1 to 3 inches per hour. But what happens is, and I think I said it 5 times on the air, don't be lulled into a false sense of security. Well, people are. They see the snow in the morning. Not too bad. They go to work. Then there's nothing. So they wait for the first flakes to fall before they leave. Well, by the time they leave, it's too late. So we had people that lived anywhere from 10 to 20 miles from work that took 8 to 13 hours to get home. All right, now the next 3 days, we're still okay the first half of Friday.
Topper Schutt is a familiar face to viewers in the Washington area. He's been on their television screens for over 20 years and always knew he was going to be a weatherman.
Some areas may actually hold in the upper 60s on Saturday. Well, Jenny, I'm kind of a weird person. I started forecasting when I was 10. I built a weather station when I was 8. So I'm kind of a geek in that respect.
And as Topper freely admits, weather is big news in the United States and much talked about.
Well, we kind of are obsessed with the weather because we have to be. We live in a country that averages 1,000 tornadoes a year. We have hurricanes. We have blizzards. We have every imaginable weather phenomenon there is, and we have these extremes. So it's interesting, and it's also dangerous.
This focus on the weather is underlined by the level of resources weather reporters have at their disposal. The stations all have weather centres, and this one is typical. There are 3 full-time staff working here and 1 part-timer.
That's pretty much state-of-the-art. You know, we've been HD now since '05. And all the graphics are now HD, and we have, there's actually more computers in there than you see because we have a keyboard switch that can access other computers. And we have a dual on-air computer for graphics, so one goes down, we still have an on-air, computer to put graphics on the air. For the Northeast, we get the biggest snowstorms on the planet.
While Australian weather reporters almost exclusively use the forecasts supplied by the Bureau of Meteorology, the National Weather Service in the States, NOAA, is only a starting point. So the station owns its own Doppler radar?
Correct. We own it, and we place the physical radar on the campus of the University of Maryland in College Park. So we're actually training the next generation of radar meteorologists. They have access to the data. Oh, another spectacular day. I quite frankly don't even see the Weather Service forecast before I go on. I make sure I look at their discussion. I think forecasting is fun. And I usually knock out the forecast before I get to the office. So when I'm here, people can ask me questions. I check in with the producers. What's going on? Am I the lead? Am I page 2? Should I be the lead? And then I can just draw the graphics, but I have the forecast. What I look at as our prime goal is to protect life and property. So with their severe weather, we're on the air.
Perhaps the greatest weather risk in the United States is a tornado. The Doppler radar is vital for identifying and tracking these dangerous storms.
When we do tornado coverage, we use our live Doppler, and we had 15 tornadoes, the 27th and 28th, at the tail end of that outbreak in the south. And we are then able with Doppler to say, if you live at this crossroad, this is where the damaging hail is, this is where the tornado could be.
Aside from the dramatic weather presentation and the extensive graphics, the accuracy of forecasting is on a par with Australia.
Nowadays, there's so much information, there's so much computer modeling and radars that, we might call for 4 inches and get 2. We might call for 4 and get 6. But it's not like when I grew up where they called for flurries and we had 2 feet. And that just really can't happen. There's just too much information out there. And I think the computer models will get better and better at forecasting, and really what it comes down to is getting the grid smaller. You know, how small can you make the grid? Then you get into theoretical meteorology. If we could launch a balloon every 3 feet, well, we'd probably never miss a forecast, but economically that's not going to happen. And even with the computers today, probably we don't have the time to process all that data if we had it. And that's what happened back in the old days. The computers were so old, they couldn't process it. They barely got done crunching the numbers before the next balloons went up. If you don't understand this, go to our website, WSA9.com, click on my blog. But tomorrow, without the aid of telescopes or binoculars...
But there's no doubt the delivery of weather news is totally different to the Australian experience.
We have text messages going to our subscribers. You can get our webcasts on iPad, on a Droid, on an iPad, on an iPhone. So the idea is to give people good, current weather information whenever they want it on whatever platform. And it's no longer just over the airwaves.
There's one place that any self-respecting weather reporter has to visit when they come to the United States. It's the Mount Washington Observatory in the northeast corner. It's situated on a barren peak about 2,000 metres high, and it claims to have the worst recorded weather in the world. It's also a very tricky place to get to.
Hello, how are you today?
The Presidential Mountain Range in New Hampshire is a bleak but strangely majestic part of the world. It's attracted hikers for nearly 150 years and at one time housed an expensive health resort. The Cog Railway was built in 1869 to make the journey safer and more accessible. With a reputation for having the worst recorded weather in the world, it's probably not surprising that the health resorts are long gone. But the original railway survived, and it still provides the only access to the summit at the start of spring when the road is still closed by snow. And at the top is the world-famous Mount Washington Weather Observatory.
It's pretty amazing. You always have to be careful, but you can hear the building shaking. You can actually, once you've been up here for a little while, you can tell which direction the wind is coming from based on the sound. But I remember in March of 2008, we had a day where winds were sustained over 100 miles an hour for the whole day. And for a little while, we had winds sustained about 120, 130, with a gust up to 145. And we went out into what we call the rotunda, the cafeteria area, and sat down on the concrete floor, and the floor was vibrating.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Stacey Kowecki has been a weather observer on the mountaintop for several years and explains the unusual working conditions at this private non-profit organisation.
Since we do work on a mountaintop, we're up here for a week at a time, and for each week we have 3 weather observers. Depending on the season, we'll have 1 or 2 interns, and then in the summertime we have a museum supervisor, and that's the person who runs the museum, and we almost always have 1 or 2 volunteers as well.
So what particular measurements do you take up here on the mountain?
Most famously, we measure the wind, and we do that with a bunch of different kind of anemometers. We also measure temperature, relative humidity, dew point, visibility, wind speed, direction, precipitation, whatever it happens to be doing outside. So we're constantly monitoring the weather. We like to say we hold 2 records, one with the fastest wind speed observed by man, second fastest in the world. I think Australia owns that now. But the second being the most broken instruments. We go through a lot of instruments because the weather is so extreme up here.
So what is this famous record? In 1932, a wind gust of 231 miles per hour, that's 372 kilometres per hour, was recorded at the observatory. The record was proudly held until 1996, when a cyclone at Barrow Island off the West Australian coast delivered an extreme 408 kilometre per hour gust. But as that was determined by satellite, the Mount Washington Observatory now qualifies their claim with observed by man. Today, the weather is relatively mild, but that's not always the case.
So this is our haze wind chart. It's a 24-hour chart. Starts at midnight, goes to the following midnight. And the way it's read is the further away the red line is from the center circle, the faster the wind speed is. Today, it's not all that windy. But if you come back on a different day, you can see that this is what a really windy day looks like on a haze wind chart.
Curiously, Mount Washington is at the end of the weather systems for the United States.
Well, this right here is a map of storm tracks that have crossed the United States. It's over 10 years average, and this map was made in 1908. And New England is considered the tailpipe of the United States, and that's because pretty much any storm system that starts out west will end up exiting the continent through New England.
Bad weather has brought fame to this lonely outpost, but we've been lucky today. After a short visit, it suddenly seems much colder and the clouds are getting darker. Typically, there's a 20-degree Fahrenheit difference between the base of the mountain to the top. We hasten to the railway, which will take us back to warmer climes. And that's the show from the other side of the world. Springtime has certainly brought plenty of woes to the country, but lots of smiles as well. New Yorkers are very proud of their tulip displays right across the city. They only bloom for a week or two, but I was lucky enough to catch them. Until next time, I'm Jenny Woodward. Bye for now.